AI is more scalable. It never gets tired. It can last forever, and it can improve over time. But we have the experience and the training and the context. We know what questions we need to ask in order for AI to help us as well. And let me give you an example. So being at LSU, of course, this football season has been very dramatic for us as we've lost a coach and have a new coach, and it's been a mess. But before the season even began, I asked, what will LSU's record be in football this year? ChatGPT says with the 2024 season behind them, we seem to aim on their successes, and it's going to be up to us how we develop and return players. They never answered. Why didn't ChatGPT answer? It didn't answer because it was trained on data which is looking backwards. It can't make projections forward because it's not trained on projection data. It's trained on backward-facing data. Gemini, analysts are projecting LSU to have a strong season, 8-4 to 10-2. We're missing the 10-2 days here. But if you look through here, the very last part of Gemini's answer, it says sites like 247 Sports and College Football News. What Gemini did is they grounded their answers in existing web data. That's a fundamental difference of approach between them and ChatGPT. How about Claude? Claude says, I don't know. I stopped learning in October. Another answer. Meta. To estimate their record, let's consider their performance and the strength of their opponents based on last year's start where they had one win. So what they did is they actually reasoned. They used reasoning. But the difference with Llama is Llama explained it to you. Look at that difference between ChatGPT versus Llama. Last one, and my favorite, X. Breaking it down, non-conference, LSU should handle La Tech, Southeastern, and Western Kentucky. I'm going to pause for a moment there. We haven't even played Western Kentucky. We're playing them on Saturday, but X didn't know that. Clemson's a toss-up. So they reason it through. But my favorite part of this entire part is the very last sentence. My gut says 7-5, but college football is wild. Check back after a few games. Why did it respond in that way? Because it was trained on Twitter. And that's how people on Twitter talk. What you can see from this analysis is every AI has a personality. And that personality is based on how it was trained. So the foundations of AI is data. Being in Louisiana, oil and gas company, we of course have to say that data really is the new oil. Every company that you see in front of you right now, it has already signed an agreement with OpenAI so that they can be crawled. What does that show you? Data is the foundation of all AI, and all the AI systems realize it as well. And there's some thinking that we may actually hit the end of the ability to draw new data sources as well. So we've seen some controversy over the past 6 weeks or so. The Guardian had a story, for example, about an AI system that wouldn't shut itself down, or you see other type of negative stories as well. But the Guardian one, for example, particularly, what they were doing is they were using data from one AI system, the output from one AI system, to train another. So there's some thinking that we may actually arrive at a point where the output from one AI system may be used as training data for another. That shows you the importance of data today. So how do we go about interacting with our LLMs? That's where we see prompting. And if we look at it, every single different LLM looks largely the same in how we prompt our AI systems. It's all about the prompt. And here's a series of different books that you can see that talk to you about prompt engineering, because prompt engineering is about your ability to define the problem. And your ability to define the problem will also influence your ability to get the right answer. So I'm going to shift for a moment. We kind of have an idea of the foundations that are involved. Let's talk about what can happen once you start the process of prompting. And what I want to do now is spend a few minutes talking about some different prompting techniques. Now, I'm not going to go through and show these in practice because you'll be sitting there watching AI generate itself. What I want to do is simply give you some examples and give you some ways to think about prompting that may be a little bit different. So this is typically how we start when it comes to AI. We usually start by doing something that's very direct. So you may say something like very specific, and I can give you an example. So my wife and I were talking a few days ago. We're talking about New Kids on the Block, one of our favorite bands, right? We just got back from Las Vegas where we saw them in residency. So we started talking about them, and my wife said, I wish I knew all the different autobiographies that existed about New Kids on the Block. Open up ChatGPT, ask them something specific. Tell me all the autobiographies written about members of New Kids on the Block. Now, that doesn't require any context, but what that did is that enabled me to not necessarily have to worry about searching through Google. Maybe you want it to summarize something. So you upload a document and said, summarize this. Maybe you don't understand something. Explain blockchain to me. These are not contextual questions. These are very straightforward. And really, this is a surrogate for Google. List the 7 continents of the world. Convert 100 miles to kilometers. Define artificial intelligence. These are all suitable use cases for AI systems and generative AI. But we have to keep in mind, as you do this, it doesn't know anything about you or the reason why you're asking the question. So let's say, for example, that you're starting, our example, a consulting company. What would a direct prompt look like? I'm starting a consulting company. Where should I start? You can see that that's a very fundamental, easy question, and you can see yourself asking that about AI as well. But what's the problem? What type of consulting company? What's your target market? What do I know about you? What do you need advice on? So you see that the direct approach is great, but it doesn't actually ask for requirements. What are you trying to consider? What is inbounds? What is out of bounds? What tone do you want to talk? Is this conversational or is this more serious? So direct prompting has a role, but it's also very limiting. So let's talk about the next approach. Let's go to an instructional prompt. What if you take this direct prompt, but you limit it in some context? So let's give us some example. So information, maybe you need some information. So here's an example. I need a list of the top most effective ways to craft a message in social media where I don't know where to start based on research. Let's pause for a moment. Let's contrast this with the previous one. What if you just said, I need a list of the top 3 most effective ways to craft a message in social media? Well, what's the difference here? Now you're saying, I don't know where to start. So you're giving it context. So AI will then say, all right, let's start from the beginning. Second one, I'm in charge of social media at a consulting company. Tell me how to craft a message. You contextualize it to your context. Now look at the difference between the first two. In the first one, you could run a hair salon. It could be some other type of business. It's not necessarily a consulting company, but now you put the context in. Think about this. If you frame it for a consumer-facing business, your social media is going to be a whole lot different than if it's a business-to-business arrangement. The context contextualizes that in an important way. Formatting. What if you want it like in a table format? Give me the list of the top 3 best practices, but give me the pros and cons in table format. So now rather than having to copy and paste it and move it around, you format it for you. Last, I need a list of the top 3 best practices and tell me why each is important. You've been very specific. Maybe your boss has said, tell me why. So you can see that within this context, it matters. So in our example, I could say, I need a list of how to create a social media campaign for a technology-based consulting company where our target market is XYZ. You see that the more that you layer on context, the more direct your answers are going to be. Now, the other thing you can do is, in addition to giving it information, you can tell it what not to do. You can constrain it. You can constrain it by the length. You can constrain it by the number of items, like 3 versus 5. The level of detail. You can have a specific format. You can structure it in a way that's important. So for example, start with an introduction, then have a main points and a conclusion. You can tell it to identify sources or to exclude information or to include information. You can guide the AI in a way that it assists you by constraining it and providing instruction along the way. So before we go on, I want to give another example that's outside of the consulting company, and I'll give you an example of a organization that I talked with as well. So a friend of mine runs a salon. So he was looking to take over his social media and allow ChatGPT to come up with a social media plan for his salon. So we started with direct prompting. We said, come up with a social media plan for a salon, and we let it go. And it was good. It was fantastic. It told us what to do, when to do. But then we began to layer on constraints. I said, next, tell me what you know about this salon in Youngsville, Louisiana. ChatGPT went out and did research on the salon based upon what it had online, and it came back and it said, the target market for this salon is suburban women in rural Louisiana. Okay, fine. Then I said, now redo the social media plan given what you know about the salon. All of a sudden, that got contextualized. It was suggested, for example, post it on Instagram at 9 a.m. because suburban women tend to check Instagram between 9 and 11 a.m. That constraint allowed the message to be delivered in a lot more nuanced way.